This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Pakistan has called on its Afghan ambassador in protest over the comments that were issued by the Afghan President Hamid Karzai, who threatened to attack armed Taliban fighters inside Pakistan's territories.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's foreign minister described Karzai's comments as irresponsible and added that his country will defend its territorial sovereignty.
تصريحات الرئيس الأفغاني التي هدد فيها بملاحقة مقاتلي حركة طالبان داخل الأراضي الباكستانية قوبلت برد فعل غاضب.
The comments issued by the Afghan president regarding the pursuit of Taliban fighters in Pakistan were met with angry reaction from Islamabad. Pakistan issued a warning against Afghanistan and accused it of interfering in its internal affairs. Some described Karzai's comments as a declaration of war against Islamabad by Kabul on behalf of the United States and demanded that Pakistan respond strongly to such remarks. The military operations launched by armed Taliban fighters from Pakistan's territories are not breaking news. However, what's new is the notable escalation in the level of attacks launched by the Taliban during the past few months, which seems to cause concern for the Afghan government and the coalition forces. Among the foremost Taliban military operations was the recent suicide and armed attack on the central prison in Kandahar, where hundreds of Taliban prisoners were released, prompting the Afghan government to declare a state of emergency in Kandahar. The attack on the prison came 2 days after the US-led coalition forces carried out an air raid in an area close to the Pakistan-Afghan border. Islamabad said that 11 Pakistani soldiers were killed in the border attack. However, the US Department of Defense defended the raid and described it as a legitimate, justifiable, and in self-defense. It seems the recent developments on the ground have added to the fear of the Afghan government and the US forces. Both the Afghan government and the US forces believe that the peace agreement signed between Islamabad and the Taliban movement in Pakistan is behind the recent increase in the number of attacks inside Afghan territories. This military escalation, which the US has previously warned against, may seem to be the reason for the angry remarks issued by Karzai.
وهذا ما قد يكون المبرر لتصريحات كارزاي الغاضبة.
NATO and Afghan forces are redeploying troops to Kandahar. Officials say it's in response to a threat from the Taliban, which has moved hundreds of fighters into Al-Iraqiya district. That's about 30 kilometers north of Kandahar city. They now claim to be in control of at least 10 villages. Well, Al Jazeera has visited the area where local people could be seen fleeing the possibility of increased violence. Around 500 Taliban fighters are said to be involved in the operation and may be planning to continue on to Kandahar city.
I don't have the detailed information on what's going on there. We're aware of the reports about Al-Iraqiya and we're aware of the reports about people being there. What I can say is that both the Afghan security forces and ISAF are redeploying forces or sending forces to deal with any potential threats in the Kandahar area.
Well, General Zahir Azimi is the spokesman for the Afghan Defense Ministry in Kabul. He denies that the Taliban are making any secure gains in Kandahar.
We are going to strengthen the pace of the operation that we already have in Al-Iraqiya and Panjshir districts. Therefore, we are sending more troops to Kandahar, and Chief of Staff of the country is there to closely observe the situation. The Taliban have 400 to 500 fighters in Kandahar and Al-Iraqiya districts, but they don't have permanent bases there. They are moving from one place to another.
Well, our correspondent Hashim Mahlabara is in Kandahar city. He says these latest attacks are part of Taliban attempts to demonstrate their strength.
By the way, the Arghandab has been taken over by the Taliban a few months ago, and then after 3 days and intensive bombardment of the international forces and the Afghan army, they withdrew. So it was the same long tactic of hit and run guerrilla warfare, and people have been paying the heavy price of instability and insecurity here in Afghanistan.
في سوريا حيث الجليد يذوب بسرعة غير مألوفة هذه الأيام.
After more than 2 years of strained relations, the ice between Paris and Damascus is melting unusually fast. According to a statement by the Élysée, President Nicolas Sarkozy described the talks between his 2 delegates to Damascus and President Bashar al-Assad as useful and constructive. Everyone agreed on the importance of encouraging implementation of the Doha Agreement in Lebanon and the peace process in the Middle East. Intisar Yunus reports from Damascus.
Damascus and Paris quickly shook off the dust that had accumulated on their relations since the assassination of Lebanese Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad met with 2 French delegates to Damascus, the presidency's Secretary General Claude Guillon and the diplomatic consultant Jean-David Levitte. The talks were considered to be the first signs of progress within this framework. The Élysée officially described the talks as useful and constructive.
By sending the envoy to Syria now, France is demonstrating its realization that Syria's role is indispensable and is fundamental in the area. This is not only because of Syria's size, weight, and affect, but because Syria is a rightful owner and is part of the solution.
The talks concluded by emphasizing the importance of encouraging the Lebanese people to implement the Doha Agreement. This is in addition to strengthening Syrian-Lebanese and Syrian-French relations. The talks also discussed the developments of the peace negotiations between Damascus and Tel Aviv.
The French are aware of the fact that the U.S. plan is stumbling in the negotiations between the Iraqi government and the U.S. administration around a permanent and ongoing agreement that guarantees U.S. interests in Iraq. At the same time, the French feel that they have gained nothing. Quite the contrary. The Americans have put the French in a situation where they have given so much and have gained nothing. They want to restore France's role in the region, to protect French interests, first and foremost.
Guillon and Levitte discussed the new Mediterranean Union, in which the extent of Syria's involvement is still unclear. However, Damascus still has reservations around normalizing relations with Israel without receiving anything in return and before peace is established. The Syrians and French connect during the U.S.'s absence, which might determine the upcoming political progress in the area differently from Washington's previous plans. Intisar Yunus, Dubai TV, Damascus.
In
the beginning of her visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories, the U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice criticized the ongoing Israeli settlement campaign. Before meeting with her Israeli counterpart, Tzipi Livni, Rice expressed concern over the continuous building of settlements by Israel due to its negative impact on the peace process and the building of confidence between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Meanwhile, the Palestinian lead negotiator, Sa'ib Ariqat, urged the U.S. and the International Quartet on the Middle East to put an end to the Israeli policy in order to give peace a real opportunity to succeed.
The U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice started the negotiation process in the occupation state of Israel and the West Bank. This is Rice's 7th visit to the region since the Annapolis Peace Conference. Rice held a series of brief bilateral talks with Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and his Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni and Defense Minister Ehud Barak. In addition, Rice met in Ramallah with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, who demanded her to pressure Israel to stop its settlement campaign. Rice also presided over a joint meeting between the head of the Israeli negotiation team, Tzipi Livni, and her Palestinian counterpart, Ahmed Kurea.
Dr. Rice,
I asked Dr. Rice to demand that the State of Israel fulfill its obligations on the settlements. We believe that the settlements are the largest obstacle to the political process.
Fortunately,
I do believe in the United States.
Unfortunately, I do believe, and the United States believes, that the settlement campaign that is being carried out is reflecting negatively on the process of negotiations, and this is what we don't want.
The Hamas movement confirmed that Rice's visit intends to further blackmail the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and pressure him to sabotage Palestinian dialogue, especially after his recent call to end the Palestinian division. The Palestinian factions described Rice's visit and meetings as useless and accused her of failing to pay attention to the real suffering of the Palestinian people and ignoring the blockade of Gaza. The Palestinian factions described Rice's criticism of the Israeli settlements as American lies intended to undermine Palestinian intelligence.
The meeting with Rice is useless and will not produce anything for the Palestinian people. On the contrary, this visit serves Israeli interests, and this is not new, especially when talking about the total U.S. bias toward the occupation state of Israel.
In another development, Hamas said it will evaluate the Israeli position and study all proposed options. Then it will submit a final decision on the cooling off proposal. In addition, Hamas refused to link the release of the Israeli kidnapped soldier, Shalit, with the cooling off period, a position that Israel opposes.
As soon as we receive the official Israeli response regarding the cooling off period, Hamas will announce its position, which comes in the context of the Palestinian national consensus, taking into consideration the supreme interests of our people, which includes the lifting the blockade of Gaza.
The Israeli escalation in the West Bank and Gaza and the freeing of the hands of the settlers to expand are an indication that Israel has no intention of engaging in a cooling-off period with the Palestinians, and it's also a total disregard to Rice's visit and to the cooling-off efforts being exerted by Egypt.
An Israel-Hezbollah prisoner exchange deal is expected by the beginning of next week. Those are the headlines in two Lebanese newspapers today. One of the papers, Al-Akbar, quotes U.S. sources who claim that Hezbollah and Israel have agreed to a deal in which kidnapped IDF soldiers Ehud Goldwasser and Eldad Regev would be returned to Israel in exchange for Samir Kuntar and 4 other Lebanese prisoners. 29 years ago, Kuntar was convicted of the brutal murder of Israeli Danny Haran, his 4-year-old daughter Einat, and 2 police officers in an attack on the city of Nahariya. Tzvi Regev, the father of one of the missing IDF soldiers, Eldad Regev, confirmed today that the families met 2 weeks ago with chief Israeli negotiator Ofer Dekel, who told them in general terms about the impending deal. Tzvi Regev said the families of the missing soldiers were aware that they had been seriously injured before their kidnapping, and he had said he had not been told if his son was still alive. In another development, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert had asked to meet tomorrow with the family of missing airman Ron Arad. However, the Arad family canceled that meeting. U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice made an unannounced visit to Beirut today, where she gave U.S. approval to newly elected President Michel Suleiman and the new Lebanese government. Rice expressed U.S. support for Lebanese democracy and sovereignty and vowed support for a free Lebanon. Earlier today, U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice wound up her lightning visit to Jerusalem and Ramallah with 3-way talks that included Defense Minister Ehud Barak and PA Prime Minister Salam Fayyad. In her talks with Prime Minister Olmert and Foreign Minister Livni, Rice showed her frustration with the apparent lack of progress in the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. Rice sharply criticized Israeli policies on construction in the West Bank and eastern Jerusalem. Rice also said Israel was not doing enough to ease the lives of Palestinians in the territories. At the same time, the Secretary of State said she would continue efforts to achieve a peace settlement by the end of this year. Israeli leaders pointed to the ongoing violence in Gaza, as well as reconciliation talks between Hamas and Fatah, as the real obstacles to peace.
Secularists lose sight of secular principles once they become parliament members. The other secularists are waiting for the day when the sectarian leaders will become secularists. The following report was prepared by my colleague Firas Hattoum.
نحن كان عندنا الجرأة والإقدام بعز دين التحجر بالمذهبي.
We have guts and courage. We are proposing secular principles at a time when sectarianism is very strong. As you know, for every disease there is an antidote. Secularism is the antidote of the ongoing sectarianism. Secularism is the vaccine for the poison of sectarianism.
3 years ago, the National Free Movement of Michel Aoun was popular among different Lebanese groups. The secularists were happy because they thought they had won a heavyweight fighter in the war against sectarianism. However, this fighter, whose opponents never stopped attacking him, has finally jumped on the wagon of sectarianism. Perhaps he did this against his will or voluntarily. What is important is that the Doha Agreement has led people to believe that the National Free Movement of Michel Aoun is no longer a secular party in a country where secularism has run dry. The secularist movement has lost Michel Aoun.
Today, with the Doha Agreement, we have returned to the Christians their rights. Christians have the right to vote for their representatives.
The law of 2000 and the law of the 60s have disadvantages, but the Lebanese have finally decided on the law of the 60s. This law was considered a victory. However, the candidate for the Communist Party in the 2005 elections said that when people have to choose between the lesser of the two evils, that is a type of defeat.
When we talk about the law of the 60s, we are talking about districts that are divided based on sectarianism. Each district is divided based on the power of sectarian leaders in them. The people who no longer think within the framework of sectarianism and have a national allegiance are now marginalized. They have been dispersed throughout the country. They do not live in one specific area.
Fuad Boutros spent months and days putting together his law, only to have his law be put on the shelf. Instead, a 50-year-old law is being used. The candidate of the people always asks his party, what has been accomplished?
أنا رأيي إنه في انتصارات بالمفهوم الطائفي والمذهبي، ولكن بالمفهوم الوطني في خسارة كبرى.
Everyone is talking about our victories. These are victories from a sectarian perspective. However, from a national perspective, there is a great loss. When they say victory, they refer to returning the rights of Christians or to reaching a bilateral agreement with one sectarian group against the other. I think that political reform begins with reforming the election law because it allows for changing the political elite. However, such a law may carry the seeds of a civil war which may erupt at any moment.
From his home overlooking Beirut, which has been divided into electoral districts, a secular leader has drawn a caricature for the tragic reality. He said, the talk of sectarian leaders about secularism is like the talk of devils about heaven.
The elections law reflects the sectarian leaders' power, regardless whether these laws cover all of Lebanon or only certain areas. Therefore, any change in the sectarian balance will cause instability in Lebanon, and it could even lead to strife. Lebanon has always been sectarian.
Lebanon is sectarian. Will there be a day when this will change, or will the situation stay the way it is? Secularists who would not win parliament seats are unable to do something about the political siege that has been imposed on their plight. Those who are in the parliament lose sight of the secular plight and are forced to jump on the wagon of sectarianism. Acknowledging this reality needs courage. It seems that implementing the political theory of secularism is still a long and difficult journey, even 65 years after the establishment of the Republic of Lebanon. From Nijmeh Square, Firas Hatem, New TV.
Life is normal in the city of Amara in southern Iraq amidst the intensified military presence. The Iraqi forces are preparing to implement the law enforcement operation and disarm the Mahdi army militia.
Mission Gospel of Peace is a new security operation in the Iraqi province of Missan, whose capital is Amara. The operation is led by the Iraqi forces, who are supported by U.S. forces.
The forces will carry out the procedures according to the designed plan. Starting on the 19th, they will pursue wanted and armed individuals. The aim is to disarm the province of Missan.
The operation will cover several villages and towns on the border with Iran. According to Washington and Baghdad, these areas harbor groups supported by Tehran. These areas are also a refuge for the Sadr movement and the militia of the al-Mahdi army. The Iraqi Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki, who is supervising this operation, declared the province of Missan as a disarmed area. He gave the armed groups until the 19th of this month to surrender their weapons to the security forces. He also called on the tribes in the area to participate in the surrendering and receiving of weapons.
Their deadline is in 4 days, starting from today. People are to surrender heavy and medium weapons, and the wanted individuals are to turn themselves in.
According to military sources, the Amara operation, which might begin Thursday, will be short. The sources said that unlike the operation in Basra City, the completion of this operation might not require weeks. This operation does not depend on armed confrontations, but involves surprise raids and disarmament. However, apprehension is spreading amongst followers of the Sadr movement. They consider the operations in Amara to be aimed against them, so as to remove them from the political process. The Iraqi government is determined to implement the law enforcement plan in the country and to disarm the militias. It hopes that peace will prevail with the gospel of peace. Khalid Bel-Kashif, Al-Arabiya. Al-Arabiya.
The head of the Sadr movement, Muqtada Sadr, disclosed a plan to form special groups from the Mahdi army to be in charge of resisting the U.S. occupation in Iraq. This came in a statement issued by Sadr and relayed by Sheikh Abdul Hadi al-Mahmadawi during a prayer at Al-Kufa Mosque. In it, he said that the Mahdi army is committed to fighting the occupation until Iraq is liberated.
The resistance will be restricted to a specific group which we will assign in writing soon. The group will consist of people with experience, administrative skills, awareness, and sacrifice. They will be pre-approved by the religious leader based on recommendations by previously assigned leaders. Based on this, weapons will be given only to those people, and in turn, they will only direct their weapons at the occupier and no one else.
فلسطين المحتلة، حيث ذكرت صحيفة هآرتس الإسرائيلية أن ما يعرف بلجنة التخطيط العمراني لمدينة القدس.
In occupied Palestine, the Israeli Haaretz newspaper said that the so-called Regional Committee for Construction and Planning gave the green light to build 1,300 new settlement units in the eastern part of Jerusalem. The newspaper said that the units will be built in the Ramat Shlomo neighborhood, which already includes 2,000 settlement units north of the city. It is said that this is considered one of the most ambitious Israeli settlement projects in Jerusalem. The chief Palestinian negotiator, Al-Iraqiya, expressed his outrage at this decision, which reveals the intentions of the Israeli side to destroy the peace process, according to him.
في سياق متصل أظهر شريط مصور وزعته إحدى المنظمات التابعة لحقوق الإنسان.
In a related development, a human rights organization distributed a video showing a group of settlers attacking Palestinians. The Palestinians were on their land, which is near the Sosia settlement in Hebron in the West Bank. The film shows a number of settlers with baseball bats beating up a Palestinian family while they were taking care of their sheep. Tamam al-Nawaja said that he was beaten along with his family after they refused to leave their own land. He said that a group of settlers had come by earlier and asked them to leave their land. The attack led to several family members being critically injured, including old women.
بكم من جديد. بحث وزير السياحة والآثار محمد
The Minister of Tourism and Antiquities, Mohammed Abbas Al-Iraqiya, met with the Italian ambassador to Iraq. The two men discussed ways of returning Iraqi antiquities currently in Italy to Iraq. Italy has already returned a number of Iraqi antiquities to the National Iraqi Museum.
The Minister of Tourism and Antiquities, Mohammed Abbas Al-Iraqiya, and the Italian ambassador to Iraq met at the ministry in Baghdad. They talked about Iraq's historical treasures and its priceless antiquities. They also discussed creating an agreement between Iraq and Italy.
We talked about restoring the museums in the three provinces, Diwaniyya, Nasriya, and Najaf. The second part of our meeting was about returning Iraqi antiquities that are presently in Italy.
Returning the symbols and valuable Iraqi artifacts is a work of major importance, as the antiquities represent the memory of this country. The Italian ambassador said that a number of Iraqi antiquities in Italy will be returned.
The antiquities that have been found are in Rome right now. There has been contact with the Iraqi embassy in Rome so as to facilitate the return of the pieces to Iraq.
The Italian side plans to renovate a number of Iraqi museums in Nasiriyah, Diwaniyah, and Najaf. This comes after the success they achieved in rehabilitating the Ashur Hall in the Iraqi Museum. From Baghdad, Zaid Al-Taye, Iraqiya TV.
Hi, I'm Jamal Dajani, producer of Link TV's News Digest, Mosaic World News from the Middle East. After 9/11, Link TV recognized a huge gap in the coverage by the mainstream media. I started Mosaic to help fill that gap. The idea was simple: show Americans the real images of war from the inside out, from the viewpoint of the communities who experienced the war firsthand. You would think that we'd have a lot of competition, but in fact we don't. Because to make something like Mosaic, an unedited news digest for the most troubled region in the world, you need one essential element: independence. Independence from sponsors that may profit from this war, independence from government funding that supports this war. That's why it could only happen at Link TV. We are independent media. Now I'm asking you to make a commitment to independent media. Support Mosaic and Link TV's independence by making a donation today. Just call the number on your screen, 1-866-485-8848, or go to linktv.org and make that donation online. Any amount from $5 to $5,000 keeps this network going. Nowadays, you can also catch my analysis and videos on Ariana's Huffington's blog site, The Huffington Post. Just search under Jamal Dajani. But even with all that great exposure, we still need your help to continue to make the only news digest of its kind with real uncensored images and stories. I have made more than 1,600 episodes of Mosaic and never had to censor anything because of threats from the administration or corporate underwriters. This kind of editorial freedom is almost an anomaly in this day and age. Call 1-866-485-8848 or log on to linktv.org now to keep Mosaic and Link TV the way it should be: real, uncensored, and honest. While you're online, why not check out our archived episodes? They're all there, available to you, completely free of charge. Tell your friends and family about this amazing news source. It may open their eyes to a whole new perspective. And in this election year, that can change history. Show your support by calling 1-866-485-8848 or go online to linktv.org and make that donation now. You're already watching Link, so I know you value what we bring: freedom of speech and the power of uncensored information. Thank you for your support and for making Mosaic part of your life.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.